I'm sure.
Hey, welcome to another great episode of Get Spooled.
Oh, you
Fishing.
did put the sunglasses on.
Dude, I can't see, man. We got new stadium lighting here in the studio, and man, I don't know if I'm gonna make it through the whole show, bro.
Yep.
It's kind of like right in my face. I feel like Stevie Ray Vaughan up here.
There you go.
But anyway, welcome, guys. Myself, Captain Travis in the studio, Captain James, Captain Rick, and Captain Jason are MIA. I think Jason fished this afternoon. I think Rick was in Georgia or
What's
something.
up, Bernie? Yeah,
But,
Rick's in Georgia. Jason was fishing, hopefully not in the rain. I know it's been
Dude,
covered up.
there was some gnarly rain this afternoon.
There
I
sure
come
was,
through a
man.
pretty good one on the way over.
Yeah, there was. There has been. But you know what's ironic is this whole rain season, the first time it got me was last week, and it got me twice. One time we had to run from it. The other time was in the middle of bait. And I was out there with one other guy. We're the only two out there catching bait at 6:30 in the morning, and lightning starts crackling all around us, but it's like right when the bait starts getting good, and I'm looking at him, he's looking at me like who's going to be the first to run, to get out of there.
Right.
And I gave it like two more throws, loaded up, and we were out, man. But that was that was really the first time I got soaked on a trip.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. In a long time.
The light's bright.
The light's bright, man. But you could see better. Look at the optics here. What's up, Ty?
Oh,
Ernie's
man.
on. But yeah, I mean fishing's been really good.
It
I
has
would say
been,
in this last week. And I know we've kind of been talking on the show about some struggles we've all been having on the flats, but this last week things kind of changed a little bit. And
I guess I was just lucky. I mean, you're talking about fishing on the flats.
On the flats, shallow, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think we're at that point, and you and I were just talking before the show. Got a full moon coming up.
Yep.
It's another transition period. Some fish are going to be moving around this week, I believe, especially going into the weekend, a couple days after the full moon. Normally what we're going to start to see, and you're already hearing it, kind of the wave is going around, that there's some redfish moving in. It's generally the time of year where we will start to we will start to see some bigger redfish schools. A lot of times there'll be upper slots.
Yep.
And then, as we roll into more of a fall pattern, you'll start to see some of these smaller fish actually start grouping up too. But it has definitely been a good fishery up until this point in the bay, which is where, like I said, I've spent most of my time. And so I'm looking forward to getting back and doing some more backcountry fishing and getting in the backcountry. Now, a lot of this rain, have you guys noticed where you're fishing anything different other than clarity, water levels as far as heights?
So, where I'm at, it changes a lot. The water gets dark, iced tea colored, 2 feet of water. Sometimes you can't see the bottom, but that's how I like it. That's how when I want to go target redfish, that's when I know it's going to be right. And the fish have been just fired up. The biggest change I've seen is that I'm finding water that's anywhere from 82 to 85 degrees, and that's 6, 7, 8, 9 degrees cooler than it is elsewhere. In fact, I know the flat where I'm catching bait in the morning, been averaging between 87.5 to 89 degrees, and by 8 o'clock when I'm in the first spot, I'm down to 82, 83. So that's been a big difference. I think that's what's leading to the redfish activity.
Well, a lot of times too here lately, especially early in the morning, you're getting that incoming water. It's been cooled kind of all night, with the lower temperatures, and I think that always makes it a little bit better, especially when the stars align for that to happen, where you get a good gush of incoming water through the evening, early morning, and you get those flats to cool down a little bit better.
I've had a couple good weeks of redfishing, better than I've seen in a long time, which is very encouraging. And I'll tell you, when I'm planning these trips with folks that want to target redfish, I'm looking for the last part of the incoming tide.
Yeah.
I'm looking for that last good bit of moving water. It's coming in clean. It's coming in cool. So that's been the ticket for sure.
Cool.
Dan Lively joined. Wow, that's a blast from the past. Eric, our boy Eric, Manny, how's everybody? I think what I saw you lighting up last week though was the big mangoes, and sounds like you're getting pretty deep.
Yeah, it's been good. It's something that I'll normally do, later in the season, or at least later in the summertime. This last full moon, I think, easing into this last full moon has been really good. We've caught a lot of big snappers. 4 or 5 pound snappers have kind of been regular. But it's been, at least in numbers, it's a real small window to fish them where you can get a high quantity of them.
Right.
Like if you want to catch 10, 15, 20 of them in 30 minutes, it's a very particular portion of the tide. It's right at the slack tide, 15, 20 minutes before, 15, 20 minutes after, and that's it.
So you have max about an hour?
You have max about an hour to fish. Last week I loaded up on a lot of lead, and everybody kind of looked at me with sideways eyes, and it was just because of that. And so if you get there a little early or you stay a little later, it's literally every 10 minutes you add a little bit more weight or you take a little bit of weight away. It's that precise when you get into that. But what's nice is they're deep, so you're fishing on the bottom and you're getting the groupers. You're getting the big runs on bottom fish as well. We caught some big red grouper. So you never know what you're going to pull. And of course, we had a lot of fish that you just couldn't turn. I'm using medium action gear, not using your traditional bottom fishing gear. And we're fishing anywhere from, 40 to 48, sometimes 50 foot, fishing in some of these holes off the edges of the channel. But it's been good. It's been the bigger fish. So we've enjoyed doing that. And Ernie mentioned there about trolling for grouper, and I started doing that about 2 weeks ago. We started. The problem is, or the hard part is during that primo period to go troll for grouper, I'm normally snapper fishing right now. Yeah. Because it kind of aligns at the same time where you really want that slack tide to do your grouper trolling. Or at least that's the kind of the optimum time, and then you get a little bit longer with the window on the trolling for grouper around the channels. It's probably, I'd say, an hour before and an hour after, as opposed to like that 20, 30-minute mark. But the trick to that lately has been the amount of grass that's been coming in and out. And so particularly some of the channel edges that I like to fish, on the turn of the tide, you'll get a big influx of grass.
Tons.
That just covers the area that you're trying to troll, and it almost makes it impossible to troll plugs. So that's been sort of the X factor with that. But the fish are definitely there. Haven't been catching any big grouper on the troll yet. A lot of the grouper that we've been catching are anywhere from I'd say 18 to 22, 23 inches. But as the water starts cooling, these bigger fish are going to kind of move in.
That's what I was going to say is I usually wait until, I don't know, October, November. That's really when I get heavy into trolling. So it could be because right now, and you touched on it, is you want to be snapper fishing in that peak time. And during those times, it's just as easy to slide a big bait on a bigger rod, maybe a little bit bigger piece of weight down there to catch a grouper that way.
Right.
And I personally think it's going to be more productive to get that keeper size. Trolling, you're going to get fish.
You're going to get fish.
But I think you just touched on it, is you're going to get a lot of aggressive, undersized fish, which can be fun, but I'd rather do it with the live bait thing while it's still warm.
Sure.
Eric brings up a snapper question. When you're starting to target the snapper, looking for them on the bottom first. I just lost the question there. Let me scroll up.
All right, I got to kick the light, dude.
All right, the light's coming off.
This thing's driving me nuts.
Or are you picking spots produce and then just starting to chump? Well, let's assume for the question, Eric, just to keep it, a broad subject line, we're probably talking to somebody who hasn't done a ton of snapper fishing already, right? So you probably don't have a bunch of spots that you've particularly done well in the past. So where I'd be starting to look for it is the deeper water, which is going to mean the artificial reefs or the channel of the bay, and either solid depth changes or good marks of structure around those reefs and around those ledges. That's where I'm going to start. And then to identify if there's fish, yes, I'm going to chum and really just start dropping baits down with them. But we probably at this point don't do a whole lot of blind fishing, only because we don't have the time to get out there and figure out new spots. So we're returning to places, but that's how we located them in the first place, is going out there or seeing something on the bottom and figuring it out that way. So if you don't have those spots already, it's pretty easy. Get out. If you want a place to start, just get out the Skyway shipping channel and start looking for good areas on those ledges or some of the public numbers,
Yeah, anywhere that's got good current flow and good structure are generally going to hold mangrove snappers. Seawalls, rock jetties, any rock piles, anything like that's going to hold mangrove snappers. Where the snapper fishing really gets tricky is when you start to try to find the bigger ones You know, it's not very difficult to go find 8
legal
10-inch
snapper. Yeah, you can
know,
get legal snapper.
But to dial in those bigger fish, generally you're going to go to deeper areas, right? So if you've got a spot that you've ever caught sheep's head, that's another one. If you've got a spot that you've ever caught grunts, there's another one. That's all good live bottom, things to kind of key in on. And you may have gone there at the wrong time to catch snappers and not been able to catch them. If you have a spot like that you've caught fish like that in the past, whether it's in the wintertime or whatever, go there and start there.
Yeah.
And like you said, edges of channels, any of the public reefs, any of the public numbers, generally you're going to have mangrove snapper on it. What I find more often than not, and especially doing seminars and talking to customers, is a lot of people fish the same areas that I do for snapper. The difference is they're not there at the right time, or they're not really set up and fishing, quote unquote, the right way.
Yep.
And so just like inshore, the spots really aren't the secrets as much as how to kind of target the fish, know when to, what I say, blow your load on chum. We got to the first spot that we fished the other day with my customers, and it was strictly, snapper, grouper. That's what they wanted to go do. So we went and caught bait on the flats. I loaded down the live well with 1.5 to 2 inch baits and a lot of pinfish, a lot of like 2 to 3 inch pinfish. We got to the spot, and immediately I started dropping down pinfish. The current was still moving a little bit. We were in about 45 feet, so I was using a 1/2 ounce egg sinker, slip sinker, like a knocker rig, dropping down small pinfish. We had to actually add a little bit. We went up to like a 3/4 ounce just to get it down because the bait was starting to get too far away from the boat before it hit the bottom.
Right.
And a lot of people wonder why I use a knocker rig as opposed to like a traditional, Carolina rig or something like that. What I like to do is when you drop the weight down, especially with a pinfish, generally it's a slip sinker. So people automatically think that the whole entire time you're fishing, your egg sinker is sitting
on the hook
by your bait, and it's not. You set that bait down, and once it gets to the bottom, you just kind of pull up on a little bit, straighten your line out, and let it sit back on the bottom.
Yeah.
Most of the time, you're not pulling up enough slack to bring the bait all the way back to the lead because the lead's falling faster than the bait.
Right.
So the entire time, your pinfish is probably trying to go up a little bit, and by the
Just
time
get
your
10,
lead
15,
hits the
20 feet
bottom,
away.
you may have 8, 9, 10 feet of line out before your bait's actually to the hook. And so that's kind of a little tricky process to get right. You see a lot of people that tangle up the bait on the way down.
Yeah.
And so clearing that bait after it gets to the bottom is a key in fishing on the bottom, especially in some of the rocky edges and stuff that we fish in Tampa Bay. And you want just enough weight to get to the bottom. If you're plunging down, if you're taking a 1 ounce or 1.5 ounce or 2 ounce lead and plunging down into some of these spots, you're going to get hung in the rocks every time. You want that thing to just gently almost sit on the bottom. That way you keep your bait in the strike zone, 1 foot or 2 foot off the bottom where those fish are at.
Yep.
So anyway, that's what we did. And then once the tide slacked off, it was like I started throwing handfuls of chum in the same places we were catching some snapper. And all of a sudden I saw 1 or 2 of them come to the surface. And I was like, all right, boys, we literally put the bottom rods down, grabbed some inshore rods, free line, and we started just using little bitty pieces of greenback and free lining them back. And I started chumming with live bait, and we caught a limit in like literally 10 minutes.
Yeah.
It was over.
Yep.
And then we went back to bottom fishing for grouper and did some trolling. So if you hit it right, it's awesome. If you're there at the wrong time and the tide's moving too much, it's just painful.
Yeah.
You're not going to be able to fish, appropriately.
Eric,
So,
I'm reading what you're typing here, and what I'd probably say at this time is either keep working new places in the channel, or get to some alternative types of structure, whether it be on the bridge, whether it be the artificial reefs, industrial areas with big, deep concrete docks and rocks and seawalls. But yeah, I'll say that grouper are generally found, for me, I'm just going to make a very general statement, is I will fish for grouper in productive snapper spots, but I won't always necessarily fish snapper in productive grouper spots. And I don't know why that is for me. If I want to go and get a big grouper, I tend to have specific places for them. But in the areas I'm fishing, but I don't do a lot of snapper fishing in those same locations.
Yeah, I
You know,
mean, you tend to, in my opinion, a lot of the snapper spots, especially from our perspective, right? I mean, I need to find a limit of snapper generally. That's what, if you're going to go snapper fishing, it's just like going trout fishing.
Right.
Most of the time, the target is you're dedicating that trip to go get, that
that's
meat.
mission.
Right,
Yeah,
that's
mission. A.
So I'm going to a place where I've got numbers.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to miss 3 or 4 fish. I might not get them off the bottom. You're going to get bit by porpoises and sharks, and et cetera, et cetera. So I'm going to more of the spots where there's larger aggregations of snapper. There's a lot of folks that will fish 2 or 3 different spots down an edge and catch a handful in each spot, and so that's just a different mentality. But so I'm fishing the bigger areas most of the time. To answer and to kind of some insight into Eric's question there, a lot of times if you're just kind of shooting in the dark, throwing darts at the chart, look for pinch points. Look for points that are going to be dug out, and I'm not talking about stuff like you'd see on a mangrove shoreline or whatever. This is stuff that theoretically is under the water, right? So a place where a channel comes to a T, a place where a channel turns really hard. Look at the topography of what's around that channel. Sometimes there's ledges that shake off of those channels, and a lot of the new charts nowadays come standard with those mapping topography bottom.
Right.
So like even on like a Simrad, the basic charting that comes with Simrad, you can put it on there, and you'll see the main shipping channels, and then off to the sides you'll see these big blobby looking shapes.
Yeah.
Well, if you go to those and you just drive around those, you'll find ledges and edges that are holding fish. Most of the time, new spots, if I go prospect an area, I look for the places like that are close to the channels. Generally what will happen is a lot of the fish on a rip and tide will jump in the channel and go lay down in the edges or in the troughs, and then when the tide slacks off, they'll hit these flat points and go up there and feed, where they can get around and move around a little bit without getting blown around by the ripping currents that are in the middle of the bay. So that's what I would do, is if you're trying to target long stretches, it could be difficult if you don't have kind of a starting point.
Yeah. Especially the method he's doing, where he's trying to set up and chum. I mean, you're not going to cover a lot of ground doing that. You're going to invest a lot into that location, and then you're going to have to pick up and move if it doesn't pan out. So
Right.
Yeah, trying very small white. Yeah, I know he's getting access to whitebait, the small stuff that we have right now.
Pinfish have been bar none for me, the best snapper grouper bait you can get right now. There's some, some of the pinfish you'll drop down, they won't do the deal. Reel them up, take a different one, put it on there. It has to be, in my opinion, a really, really lively pinfish.
Yeah.
You'll drop some of those down, and by the time they get to the bottom, you're having to kind of move your weight a little bit to even feel the bait. If you get one and you fire him down there and he's going nuts, they're going to get eaten, whether it's a snapper or a grouper. It's just, that's been the case. I mean, we're loading up on those small pinfish. The only thing I'm using the whitebait for right now is during the slack tides to get the snapper off the bottom and get them in some sort of chum slick so that I can fish them. Yep. Otherwise, I'm
hitting the bottom.
I'm getting weight to the bottom and using.
No, and are you chumming when you're doing that?
When
the current's moving a little bit and you're dropping those pinfish down?
Not necessarily.
Yeah.
Now if we're dropping down singles and we're getting bit, here and there, now it's not going to be as rapid as like, when you have them chummed up.
Yeah.
You may go a minute or two before you even get a bite, or, something takes place. And so if you get a lull of like 10 minutes or so, I may reach over and drop a handful of liveys in,
right.
or,
just to kind of
try to mix something up a little bit, or maybe put somebody on a big white bait just to see. But every time we've sort of got outside of that pinfish box, it just hasn't really produced.
Gotcha.
So we've sort of stuck with the pinfish.
Where I've been getting bait, I just haven't been finding those small pinfish, which, you're always thinking like, how it is when you're catching bait on the flats. You just want that white bait just to get the well right,
Yeah.
There's been no small pinfish with them. The only pinfish I get are at the end, and they're big.
That's the one thing about the South Shore Tampa Bay,
you guys.
Is we are like a pinfish hatchery.
I
mean, there is no shortage of pinfish. And I honestly think, this has been an ongoing topic for years with me about pinfish, but I think in our area they're so productive, or you can be so successful with them because of the abundance of the fish.
Yeah.
You know, it's like if you go to the Everglades, you're going to be using finger mullet. If you go to, Louisiana, you're going to use cockahoo minnows.
Yeah.
It's just that's what's prevalent in the area. That's what those fish are used to eating. And so a lot of times, those 2-3 inch pinfish in the summertime right now, you can go catch all the snook you want on those little pinfish. The trick is just knowing how to fish them. A lot of people don't have the patience, or they throw them into a grassy flat. Not the place you want to fish a pinfish unless you cork him up and keep him above the grass. So a lot of the pinfish stuff is technique. And most of the time when you're using those baits.
Good deal. There's a tip right there. Toll flats at Skyway Bridge are loaded with baby pins.
And the big pinfish work too.
Yeah.
I haven't been looking for them. A lot of times I'll end up having a dozen or so, 4, 5, 6 inch pinfish, and generally when the snapper bite's going off and everything's going off, that's normally when I'll fire down the bigger pinfish, because generally that's when that big grouper starts looking around, kind of sees what's going on the surface, and a lot of times you'll get bit.
No doubt. So we were just talking about it before. You said a couple days before this full moon hits, what impact, if any, let's start where we're talking about snapper, kind of bottom fishing. What impact, if any, are you expecting that to have, or are you forecasting?
We're gonna get the push of inshore fish, kind of starting to make their way back towards the backcountry. The big snook are gonna start making their transition back onto the flats, start heading towards the creeks and rivers to kind of start staging up for that wintertime bulk. I think the redfish schools are gonna start to fire off. I think some of these flats are gonna start to thrive with redfish schools, particularly on the lower tides. You're going to see these fish out on the bars and kind of combing over the grass flats. During the higher tides, they're going to be pushed up, split up in the trees. You're going to start seeing a lot of guys catching some of these bigger redfish in the trees on the higher tides. And then I think you're going to start to see the bay fishing going to start to slow down at some point. These snapper aren't going to last forever. I always tell people, like, August, middle to end of September, normally it starts to fade off for me.
Really?
You can still get them, but that kind of go-to consistent snapper bite at the right tide, it just starts to fade off. And size-wise, you'll know, because you'll stop catching those bigger snappers.
October is usually for me. I'll still target them, but I'll tend to follow them out, so I won't fish in some of the locations that I'm at now. It's almost like the reverse pattern of when I started snapper fishing, kind of in the peak of tarpon season, is hitting locations that are a little further out, not in our portions of the bay that we like to fish day in, day out. But I'll still follow them out. I did an article with John Chapman, the guy who does hog ball jigs, and he was asking about that, like what time of year. And I said, well, last year was really good after October and into November, and even through the winter, our snapper bite stayed pretty consistent for me. What made it more difficult is those places you can go out and target them, they're not as widespread, so now we're targeting them in very specific places. If we can't get them there, we can't get them, and the dolphins are there. So that's what made it difficult. But I'll generally follow snapper back out, kind of like when I find them on the way in, before this time of year when you get them just loaded everywhere. But we can still target them. Now, are you looking for these moons to push these fish further in to the bay? Or do you think they're pretty comfortable where they're at for the rest of the summer?
I mean, I think a lot of these fish are posterior of the bridge at this point.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously there's places where there's resident school of redfish that just seem to be there year-round. Maybe not in such larger quantities certain times of the year, but you're going to see a push of fish that come in from the Gulf. I think the Sarasota-Bradenton area has already felt somewhat of a wave of those fish moving in a little bit. But you're going to see, particularly over the next month, you're going to see more redfish posted on social media, being caught, being located. You're going to hear, thought there was no redfish around, and all that sarcasm is going to start again. But it's going to come. Hopefully that's the idea. Based on what I've seen, based on what I've heard, it's only a few weeks away. If there's already some redfish schools around.
Yeah,
we've already seen quite a few popping up in the area. I just haven't really been out to target them yet. So looking forward to that.
They're there, and be this what it may with whatever anyone's feelings are on a closure. I feel like I'm seeing a difference in being able to target redfish, for sure. So I'm happy with the way it's gone. We'll see what happens in May. But I'm starting to get a lot of clients asking about that. A lot of people are asking about what's expected in May. Whether it's going to be open back up, and I really just tell them I don't know. I really don't. But
you don't know. I mean, you got to hold your faith in science and what they're doing, and that's the only thing I can do. I mean, obviously, we don't do the research. We don't deal with that stuff on a daily basis.
Yeah.
But what I was able to do was voice my opinion and at least my experience of what I've seen in the bay.
Mm-hmm.
And I honestly think that a closure is what we needed to try to help rebuild the redfish population that we have, whether it was here locally or to come back into the bay. I know a lot of fish move north, and so what we're hoping is that some of those fish will kind of move back into our area, especially on this next spawning cycle, which we're about to see. That'll really give us a good idea. This next spawning cycle will give us a good idea, being that we haven't harvested any of the juvenile fish since May at least, and to kind of get an idea of what these local fish look like in numbers. You'll be able to kind of tell.
Especially, looking at the last 2 years, I know we all had our opinions on that, so this will be telling. Now, let me ask you a side question. Do you feel like with this closure of the snook, redfish, and trout, do you feel like it's shifting the traffic of it, the everyday angler to the middle of the bay, or do you think are you still seeing all that traffic on the flats? Like, has it changed what you've seen now that we're bay fishing this year compared to last year when redfish was open, all that? Are you seeing more boats out in the middle of the bay fishing?
That's a tough one.
Mm-hmm.
That's a tough question. That's kind of a catch-22 because we have more boaters on the water.
Mm-hmm.
We have more people moving towards Gulf or coastal communities, obviously, to pursue a passion in boating or fishing on the bay. So I think the bay in general is more populated.
Just going to see more of it.
I think you're just going to see more. I think word gets around of what's hot, and I think shows like ours and others that talk about what we're doing to be successful in Tampa Bay. I think a lot of people will follow that pattern and sort of follow the advice of stuff we give and say, hey, well, these guys are being successful out in the bay. So I think there's going to be quite a few more people that are doing that based on what the local guides and captains are doing. But I also feel like no matter what, generally the red fishing through the heat of the summer just isn't that good.
Yeah.
Normally the backcountry just isn't that good. Will you have days where you rock them? Of course you will. Mm-hmm. But as a whole,
consistently,
no. Day in, day out on the water, at least for the amount of guides that we have in Tampa Bay, and I think that's another point to kind of make. The area of the South Shore, which is where I spend a majority of my time, at any given time can really only support X number of fishing guides, X number of fishermen.
Right.
And so if you constantly pound that in the springtime, it's not as bad because the fish are spread out all over the place, But when you get periods where only small areas have quality fish or can deliver a quality bite, it becomes a traffic jam. And I think what ends up happening is the more you guide, and this is just an opinion, but the more time you spend on the water as a guide or even a recreational fisherman, you figure that out. And you say, well, instead of messing with that, I'm going to go out here and have a good time and catch snappers and sharks and tarpon and grouper and everything else, And so I think it's just the way that it all unfolds. I think the more that's out there about our bay fishing and how good and unique it can be, I think you're going to see more people follow that pattern. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of folks that don't like to fish inshore.
Yeah.
They'd rather group or snapper fish year round.
Well, look at the feedback here. Eric and Ernie both use the word learning, like this is an opportunity to learn a whole new style of fishing. So that tells me that there's some folks that, really, because prior to me guiding, I spent all my time inshore except targeting tarpon. Mm-hmm. So even I've been learning that the last 4 or 5 years, or at least getting better at it. It's not something I didn't do. Henry's saying the same thing. He's seen a few. I was just wondering, because what I've noticed is I return to a general area every year, starting in about July, to do some fun red fishing that I've just done for years. And not that I'm going to an area that's like, that gets beat up by boats or anything, but I'm used to seeing some boats around, and even on weekends, man, I'm just not seeing people there. But when I'm going out to target snapper, mackerel, grouper, even some bay tarpon fishing, I'm seeing all that traffic there. I'm seeing the bay boats and flats boats and everybody out there.
It's
which is not. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I guess what I'm saying is that there was a lot of heat when that closure started, and I think that the anglers out there are adapting fine.
You're gonna have to. I mean, they don't really have a choice, right? If you want to go fishing and you want to catch redfish, snook, and trout, well, guess what? By law, you got to release them. If you're an angler and you're a sportsman, like a fly fisherman, or somebody that likes to throw artificials or something like that, you may still be spending every morning, every afternoon throwing plugs on the flats.
No doubt.
And in fact, if you're that guy, you're enjoying the heck out of it right now.
Yeah,
because
you thinned out the flats for it.
Yeah, there isn't many folks up there that are trying to target fish to harvest them.
Yep.
So those are the folks that are probably sitting in high cotton.
He even likes it more now. I get that feedback from a lot of my repeats over the last few years that come out and typically book snook, redfish, and tarpon charters. And given that the snook bite for me, and I think we've all agreed over the summer, just hasn't been as consistent as we're used to seeing it, even in summers past, that spending way more time doing that bay fishing, and then, they're excited. They're pulling up a grouper, a snapper, a mackerel, a shark, a cobia. They get this mixed bag, and they're like, holy cow, I've been missing it. And, they're calling me back for another trip on that. So, I think it's a big...
There's one that I always will kind of talk about when I get clients to talk about. And the question always comes up, well, has the closure affected your business? Do you feel like you're losing charters? Do you feel like X, Y, Z? And for me, I say no.
Mm-hmm.
I really haven't seen any decline in trips because of the closure. That'd be, I would say, since May, right? I'm running, actually, in fact, my numbers are up from last year.
Mm-hmm.
So I can't really say that there's been a negative impact on my business. For folks that have, I'm sorry. I wish that you weren't impacted by it.
Yeah.
I think in the long run it'll make it better for not only you but for your business. So kind of hang in there if you can stretch it through. But it talks about, people ask me, well, how's it affected my business? And I said, this is mainly like snook customers that'll come with me and snook fish with me and catch 30, 40, 50 snook in a trip. Mm-hmm. And I say, well, have you ever caught a snook? Have you ever kept a snook with me? Well, no, we don't keep any snook. I said, well, my mackerel clients that go mackerel fishing with me, same exact situation. Mm-hmm. The only difference is they get to keep a few fish.
Yeah.
It's, if you're looking at excitement and you're looking at catching fish, it's just, the way I look at it is it's all about perspective. Most people perceive a mackerel, a mangrove snapper, even a shark, a bonnethead, a black-nosed shark, black-tip shark. They look at it as kind of like a bycatch because most of us have grown up here. Mm-hmm. We've caught that before. It's kind of one of those things where most people, when they start fishing, now this may have changed. This actually may have flip-flopped, but most people, when they started fishing, and I don't know if you're the same way, but when I put into the boat ramp when I was a kid, the last thing I wanted to do was fish around the boat ramp or the mangroves. Mm-hmm. I wanted to go out into the bay to catch something big. Yeah. We were trying to go to the biggest, reef.
How many trips do you get where the first question they ask is how far out
are we going? How far out are we going?
How far out are we going?
And so it really isn't until the last, I'd say, 20 years that inshore fishing has really became a staple for especially West Coast Florida fishing, And so there's so much to offer out there. There's so much that we take for granted because we don't look at it like that anymore. The perspective has changed, but there's a lot going on in the bay. Yeah. I think one of the fish right now that is probably really hoping that the closure didn't happen is our triple tail population. Those poor stupid things are just getting hammered by the meat hunters. Yeah. And it is what it is. I just think it's funny that that's the way we've adapted is just going and hammering another fish. There are some folks that traditionally fish triple tail and target them, but it's definitely been a fishery that has been opened up in the last, I'd say, since May. It's definitely been a fish that's been on the radar, and hopefully they can maintain, which I think they will. We have a healthy triple tail population.
Yeah, no doubt.
So,
Now let's change gears a little bit. Tarpon.
Uh-huh.
You still tarpon fishing?
Yeah, we flew a fish, what was it, Saturday?
Intentionally?
No,
Okay.
not intentionally. But they're still around. And you know what's funny? Late season tarpon are kind of one of those things where we're so engaged in snapper fishing, or at least most of my clients are, that it's really like they want to catch tarpon, but they'd rather catch snapper first.
Mm-hmm.
And so normally what I'll do is, put a big bait out on a big rod and we'll snapper fish. And by the time you quit paying attention to the big rod is when it takes off.
Yep.
But there's definitely some big tarpon around. A lot of the tarpon that I've seen in the bay have been anywhere from 120 to 200 pound fish. They're not small fish. These are your post spawn fish. They don't act quite like the early or the during season fish. They're not quite as aggressive. They're more trash cans. They're slobby. They're just kind of real lax. They're moving around. Even when they roll, it's not an aggressive roll.
Right.
It's generally
don't even hear it really.
Yeah, it's generally a cut bait thing on the bottom this time of year. But the juvenile tarpon bite is starting to pick up in our river systems on some of the shallow reefs and even up into the upper parts of the bay. I know that fish anywhere from 20 to 60, 70 pounds are pretty readily available. The trick with those guys are they can be even pickier than the 100-pound
fish.
That's
what I tell people is like when we talk about it, I usually say like that's kind of like an afterthought on a trip, like especially somebody that I get in that conversation with, like what's this day going to look like? Well, here's what I want to focus on. Here's what it would be our second thing that we'd go do, and maybe if we have a chance, we can make a stop in here or there and check on some tarpon. But those smaller fish that you're talking about, those 20 to 50 pound class fish, can be very frustrating. It's not something
fish.
You want to sit on.
Most juvenile fish, for people that don't know, most juvenile fish are very playful. They have no problem showing you they're there. They're normally rolling around, real happy.
Yeah.
But
it doesn't mean they're ready to eat.
It doesn't mean they're ready to eat. Now, one thing I've noticed with particularly juvenile tarpon is generally they're going to go after something flashy, fast when they're ready to eat. Yeah. They're going to want a live bait. They're going to want a plug going quick. They're going to want something they can chase down.
Sporty.
They're sporty, as opposed to, and it's kind of like a snook. I relate it to like snook fishing too. A bigger snook are generally going to be taken on a bigger bait, cut bait on the bottom, or something big that comes by them and they got to take one swipe at it and get a full meal. That's sort of like in relation to a big tarpon. When it goes into these smaller juvenile tarpon, talking about these little fry baits we're getting.
Yeah,
dude, those things can be money for tarpon. Yeah. I don't know if anybody fishes down in the Keys, but when the bridges in the Keys that flow from the Atlantic to the Gulf, when you get strong tides and they move through there at night, there's a lot of tarpon that will get in those rips. And me and my cousin Josh have done it several times where you go out there and we've got everything under the moon. You got finger mullet, you got pinfish, you got live bait, this and that. And they're coming up aggressive, eating baits,
in the lights,
and you can't get one to eat. And all of a sudden you look down and there's these little tiny shrimp going by, and that's what they're eating. And we would take, and I'm telling you, dude, catch shrimp that are like 1 inch big and put a sabiki hook, like a hair hook, in the thing and drift them back and fly these tarpon. Some of them, 70, 80 pounds.
Yeah.
And so they're just real frisky. Find out what they're feeding on is like one of the keys, especially in the river systems.
Tell you what I noticed in the last 2 weeks that wasn't there prior to that is the glass minnows in those really backcountry ponds. So in those creeks, those deeper ponds, ends of canals, those glass minnows are definitely spreading out.
I think, and we've talked about this on several episodes years ago, that for juvenile tarpon, I think it's a fly game. Like if you're a finesse fly fisherman, like that's a really good way to target
the only
those
tricky
juvenile
part
tarpon.
This time of year for those fish is, in fly, it's you don't want to. I'm not going to say you can't. Maybe Dustin will have an opinion on this. Is that it's not one of those things where you want to be blind casting a lot. And some of that water that they're in right now is dirty. So if they're not A, high numbers, or B, they're not riding the surface, you're not going to see them in even in the 4 and 5
I
foot
agree.
Types of water. But when you can, or when there are numbers, or when they're riding the surface and you can get a beat on their direction, yes, I would agree that a fly is. I've always said a backcountry tarpon, the best bait you could throw at them is a fly.
I think it is. I mean, even in some of the dirty water, we threw poppers at them.
Yeah.
And now, obviously, you're going along, you're looking for fish rolling.
Yeah.
And the one thing about juvenile tarpon, and a lot of this, for me, comes from experience in the Everglades, where you've got backcountry tarpon sitting in river systems and canals and creek systems. And they're normally set up in these bays and pinch points, where you've got 2 or 3 different angles of flow that's coming into an area, and you just got to find kind of where they're at, and roll that fly and they're almost like it's like a stream fishing kind of gig. But anyway, just something I think is key is matching that hatch, matching what they're wanting to feed on, matching the rhythm of those fish.
Yeah.
If they're rolling slow, you want to be slow. If they're rolling fast, you want to be fast.
That's a good point. Well, we covered a lot, man. I know we're coming up on the end. I do want to say that we talked about before. I was giving you an update.
We got a couple things, yeah.
August 28th, we've got a grouper seminar that's really going to primarily be fixated on Tampa Bay grouper fishing, right? This is the type that most boat owners, if you own a boat in Tampa Bay, you're going to be able to access the grouper that we're going to be talking about that evening. And Todd Fouché is going to be in here to lead that seminar, who I would consider probably one of the top aficionados or experts in when it comes to Tampa Bay grouper fishing. And I know there's a lot of good people out there. He just happens to be one I know pretty well, and over the years has shown that he's got a unique ability to target those fish. So he's going to be in here August 28th. It's a Wednesday night. It's going to be at 6:30. That same evening, there's a fly tying class going on in the fly shop. So, if you want to come in and check out the shop, learn some info on either of those 2 topics, you're going to be able to do so.
Cool. That was August 28th at 6:30.
August 28th, 6:30 p.m. And if you don't know much about Todd, check out Todd Fouché's social media account on Facebook, because he does a lot of informational videos.
Yeah, he's got
a
channel, Tampa Bay Fishing Channel. I know they post a lot of their trips and they do tips and tricks and stuff there. So it's a good outlet for you if you're looking to get some information about fishing in the bay.
No doubt. Tell you what else I saw coming in the shop today. Because I was kind of getting my old boat ready for sale over the weekend and took it into West Coast today. So came into the shop after, and I caught the guys from Shimano's educational side. They were here doing some stuff with the employees. Got to see a cool sneak peek of some new stuff that Shimano's bringing out in their rod lineup. They've got a new family of Therese rods and also grappler rods. So everyone in the jigging game, and I mean offshore jigging, is going to this lighter, either slow pitch jigging, or light jigging. That's like the new phenomenon, especially in Florida and out on the west coast of the United States. And they came in to show us some of the stuff that's coming out from them. The grappler rod that they've developed is going to be huge, and it's at a price point that everybody can get in. That's kind of been the thing with the challenge about slow jigging, is there's not a lot of people building those type of rods right now, and the ones who are getting top dollar for them.
Dollar.
So it's almost like, even if it's something you want to go try, it's going to be difficult to get in the game for anything less than $700-800. Shimano's got something that's going to be just north of that $200 price point for something high quality. What they all have in common now with the Therese family and the Grappler family is they're going to their Spiral X rod wrapping, which is unbeatable technology in itself. It's proprietary to Shimano, but they're also including the High Power X in that too, which is found in, if you're familiar with like the Conquest rods they do, and the Asquith fly rod, so what this is, it's really
it
cool.
has to do with the laminate and how they're wrapping the rod,
and also now the core of the rod. So I mean, what I saw these Therese and rods do today is, I mean, you can take the last 2 feet of the rod and bend it over and touch itself. Not the whole rod. I'm sure you can, but even take one of those rods. You show the video where they got the handle and they bend it all the way around. Yeah, that's cool. Can you do that with the last 3 feet of the rod? Make it touch over on itself? I mean, you want to talk about high sticking?
Yeah.
They were showing some high sticking to the extreme, but so
that's the thing with some that's like, you shouldn't be doing that anyway.
We're trying to solve bad habits instead of correcting.
Right.
But yeah,
it's like wearing diapers, man.
Yep. So some cool stuff we just put in our order. I know at the shop today, Brian and Joy and those guys put together a sizable order on some of that new stuff. So I can assure you TFO is going to be the first to have some of this.
Cool.
And then we got an update on the Spheros SW series, which is a 3,000. There's 2 3,000 sizes, and I want to talk about that for a second on what that means. And there's also going to be a 4,000.
Spool size?
Yeah, well, so everybody growing up, we're used to fishing. The Spheros was a big staple in your arsenal.
It was one of the first
in like the late 90s, early
marketed
2000s.
Waterproof drag systems.
Yeah, and inshore saltwater reels. Yep, but so that's a big deal. They're going. Shimano is anything that has C in the reel size, right? So the 3,000C and the 5,000C, it means compact. And exactly what that means is that the frame of the reel, the body of the reel, is going to share that of the size below, all right? So a 3,000 in a Shimano lineup, if it's a 3,000C, which it is now, that's what all of them are labeled as, is going to be the same frame and body size as a 2,500. What's going to differ, the only thing different about that reel is the spool,
right,
and how deep it's cut. The only thing different, and the handle. The handle's going to be a little more aggressive handle, or a little bit.
You're talking about going forward now,
and for years past,
right?
Yeah, this whole family of reels that's already existed from Shimano has that, but now they're going to. But when you go to Shimano or try to get any info on that, you're not going to find it. Now they're really starting to make sure everybody's in the know on the sizing. Now the same thing is with a 5,000. So a 5,000C is going to be the same body as a 4,000, but it's going to give you more line capacity and a power handle. So that's going to be the big difference going forward. But all that's on the way. Some of the new Stratics are already
here. The 5,000 was normally the jump. The 5,000 was normally the jump to between 5 and 6.
Not anymore. 5,000 is going to be that same 4,000 body, same guts, but going to give you more line capacity and a bigger handle to grab onto. So that new Spheros, though, looks cool.
To grab onto.
Yep.
That's what we all want.
There you go. But, yeah, 8 o'clock, that about does it for this evening. Till next week. Great talking to you. And I think Jason couldn't make it in tonight, but aren't we still planning on trying to do a boat propeller episode?
Yeah, we're going to do a prop segment. We'll let you know when it comes up. Probably try to do it next week. I got to get with Jason and see when he's going to be here, or if he can make it next week. But we'll do everything props. We'll do a whole show dedicated to it. We've done it in the past, and it's a pretty good show. So
good deal.
We'll like to do that again. But we'll let you guys know. That way you can guys be prepared to watch the live show to get all your questions answered. It normally is a pretty what's the word I'm looking for?
I found it. I would say that 80% of what I know about props came from the last time we did a prop show.
Yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot to know that most people don't know when it comes to propping, and being on the water obviously helps you a little bit more to understand those different little nuances with a prop. But stay tuned for that. We'll give you some information when that's coming up. But in the meantime, guys, tight lines, enjoy fishing Tampa Bay, and we will see you next week. Thanks for watching.